You are listening to part 43 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan, and welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Gemini. I hope that we didn't get too confused with all of the different antis last week.
I don't think so. I think it's a really helpful list to have.
Good. And how wonderful to know that there are so many green allies and green blessings out there to help us counter viral and bacterial infections. Certainly, with the growing resistance of bacteria, especially to antibiotics, it's good to know that nature is not abandoning us, that there are things that we can fall back on with the growing lack of drugs, especially antibiotics. It's good to know that there are herbs that are as effective as those antibiotics. So we move on then from the antis, the antibacterials, the antibiotics, the anti-infectives, the antiseptics, and so on, the antimicrobials, to pain. Last year, I taught a class at Rowe Camp and Conference Center for people of the middle age or older, looking at healthcare as we age. And I gave them a short written survey to help me kind of guide what I was going to be teaching them over the weekend. And I asked them things like, did any member of your family die of cancer? How concerned are you about cancer? Do you have heart disease in your family? How concerned are you about heart disease? And so on. And of all the choices that I gave them, the one that everyone picked was pain. It seems that everyone is in pain. Well, was it the Buddha who said pain is inevitable, but it is suffering that is optional? So let's look at pain and how we deal with pain, and what the problems with the ways that we're dealing with pain nowadays are, especially the problems with pain-killing drugs. And once again, let's see what green blessings there are to help us clear away the reliance, the over-reliance on pain-killing drugs and return to herbs. There's a really wonderful thing that happens here, and that is, as we'll see, most pain-killing drugs are kind of generalists, and so in their generalization, they do great harm to the kidneys and the cardiovascular system, and we'll see why that is. But herbs are generalists in a different way, and so they don't do harm. They actually improve our health. But let's start at the beginning. There are, according to scientists, 4 different kinds of pain. And 2 of those kinds of pain are considered to be helpful pain, and the other 2 kinds are considered to be unhelpful pain. So, nociceptive pain is a response to an intense stimulus. You burn your finger, you stub your toe, whoa! It hurts. That causes an immediate flinching, removal response. The pain message travels very, very rapidly up, faster than thought, literally, and we get ourselves out of the painful situation. Inflammatory pain. Now, we have started to learn to think of inflammatory pain as being pain that leads to further disease, and it does, and yet inflammatory pain is a protective pain because it causes cells to swell up around the area of injury, thus protecting the area of injury. This kind of pain is not as fast as the nociceptive pain. It takes a while. It kind of builds in intensity. And this kind of pain can actually turn into dysfunctional or neuropathic pain. Dysfunctional pain can refer to any pain that is no longer helping us. The nociceptive pain says, get out of here, you're being hurt. The inflammatory pain says, stop using this, it's injured, you need to get off of it, we're going to inflame it right now. But dysfunctional pain is pain that continues on after that impulse is gone. So if you get your finger near a fire and you feel that pain, you pull your hand away, the pain should stop. But in dysfunctional pain, the pain goes on and on. Now, of course, if your hand is actually in the fire and gets burned, it's more likely for the pain to become dysfunctional. If you have an inflammation, that inflammation becomes chronic. Again, it's much more likely at this point for that pain to become dysfunctional. There is also a kind of dysfunctional pain that is caused by genetic abnormalities. And there are a variety of different ways that we can have abnormal genes. There were some children who were found in Pakistan to have an alteration in a gene so that they could not feel pain at all. They were actually made money by sticking knives in themselves because they simply couldn't feel the pain. And more on that later, because we've learned some very interesting things about pain from these children. And unfortunately, there are people who have this gene very, very, very heightened, and the slightest touch sets them off. I'm going to suspect that in my family that there's some variant of this gene, because I am a tag tearer outer of my clothing, and my granddaughter certainly never saw me do that at all, but she is a champion tag tearer outer as well. The sensation of that against her skin makes her a little crazy, as it does me. When we don't have it real bad, people who have it really, really bad, the slightest touch makes them feel like they're being cut with razor blades. This is just more like kind of irritating if something is. So there's a variety of ways that we can feel pain, and whether that pain is functional or not is very important. Neuropathic pain is caused by damage to the nerve fibers themselves or to scar tissue somewhere in the central nervous system that actually causes pain that goes on and on and on. No type of dysfunctional pain and no type of neuropathic pain is useful. These are the kinds of pain that we are usually trying to get rid of, although we also spend a lot of time trying to get rid of inflammatory pain as well. So what do we do when we have inflammatory pain? What do we do when we have dysfunctional kinds of pain? We take pills that help us get rid of the pain. We take pain relievers, pain killers. We take non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And I don't think you could go into a home in the United States, Canada, or anywhere in Europe that you would not find a bottle of some kind of pain-killing pill in the bathroom, in the cupboard. The primary types of painkillers that you would be finding in people's houses would be aspirin, ibuprofen, and acetaminophen. There are other kinds as well, as we will find, but these are the primary three, and these are so common that most of us don't in any way think about them or worry about them. And yet, The leading cause of acute liver failure in the United States is not alcohol abuse or viral hepatitis. It is acetaminophen. Every year, acetaminophen poisoning results in 100,000 calls to poison control centers. This is on a yearly basis. 56,000 emergency room visits, 26,000 hospitalizations, and more than 450 deaths from liver failure. Regular users of acetaminophen double their risk of kidney cancer. In fact, the incidence of kidney cancer in the United States has risen 126% since the 1950s, and that is tied to the growing use of drugs containing acetaminophen. Scientists induce cataracts in laboratory animals by giving them acetaminophen. I had to read that statement over 3 times. I thought, surely this is a misprint. They couldn't mean it. But no, they go on to say that it is definitely known to increase the risk of many age-related diseases. It is considered a cataractogenic agent, and it is the favorite agent to use to give laboratory animals cataracts so that experiments can be done on them. The most popular acetaminophen-containing drug is Tylenol, but there are hundreds of drugs that contain acetaminophen. I never heard of phenacetin, and that's because it was taken off the market a long time ago because it caused severe kidney damage and bladder cancer. However, it turns out that acetaminophen is very closely related. In fact, it's considered a metabolite of phenacetin. In other words, the destructive properties of the drug that were banned were actually caused by the breakdown of that drug into acetaminophen, which is sold legally as an over-the-counter painkiller. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have some where you are right now. The effects of acetaminophen, in fact, have gotten so bad that the Food and Drug Administration has strengthened its existing warning on its products. And that's on all non-aspirin, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And the new warning says that there is an increased risk of heart attack and stroke. Most over-the-counter non-steroidal anti-inflammatories are used to treat pain, including the pain caused by osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and other inflammatory conditions. They are the most commonly consumed drugs in the United States and are available both over-the-counter and by prescription. Examples of these drugs would include ibuprofen, Advil, Motrin, naproxen, Aleve, naproxen, and Celebrex. For over 10 years, there's been a warning that these drugs may increase the risk of heart attack and stroke, but the current warning says that these risks increase the longer the painkillers are used, and that patients with cardiovascular disease or risk factor are at greater risk. In short, pain-killing drugs increase your risk of heart attack and stroke whether or not you have any risk factor for heart disease. These risks can occur as early as within a few weeks of starting to use the painkiller, but they do increase the longer you use it. The risk also increases when the dose is increased. And patients who take a nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drug following a first heart attack are more likely to die in the first year after that than those who do not take pain-killing drugs. In fact, very simply said, taking pain-killing drugs is going to increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, and heart failure, no matter how healthy you are. The magazine that I mentioned when we started talking about drugs, worst pills, best pills, news says, take painkillers only when necessary. Take them at the lowest effective dose, and take them for the shortest possible time. Public Citizens Health Research Group has concluded that low-dose ibuprofen and naproxen are the least likely to increase cardiovascular risk. So those would be the ones that you might want to think of first. For your typical over-the-counter nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory, the estimated risk of heart disease, stroke, heart attack is only about a 10% increase. But if you get a stronger dose or if you get a prescription dose, the risk can be up to 50% higher. So if you're taking, for instance, 2,400 milligrams of Motrin, which is ibuprofen, or 1,000 milligrams of Aleve, which is naproxen, or 150 milligrams of Voltaren, which is diclofenac, or 200 to 400 milligrams of Celebrex, which is Celecoxib, then you are going to be in the category of 50% higher risk. And for people with a history of heart disease, even a 10% higher risk is a big increase. There is good evidence that naproxen is the least likely to increase the risk of stroke and heart problems. On the other hand, it is most likely of all the nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories to cause stomach bleeding, which can also be fatal. In 2014, fatal overdoses from prescription painkillers grew by 16.3%. Almost 20,000 people died in 2014 from taking painkillers that were prescribed for them by their doctor. Staggering, isn't it?
It's staggering, yes.
Staggering, it's scary. It's very scary to me what happened. We're beginning to pull ourselves out of this tailspin, but I think this article really was an excellent article. I found this article in the AARP Bulletin last September. And the headline is stunning. It says, 46 Americans die every day from painkillers.
And that's sad.
I could hardly believe it. That people are taking drugs that cause death and consider them safe enough to have in their cupboard, even if there's children in the house. Betty was worried. She was suffering from a back condition, but she thought she was taking too many pills. Her doctor said she could take a long-acting opioid medication called OxyContin, and she'd only have to take it once or twice a day. It would really cut down on the number of pills she was taking, and it would relieve her pain better than anything else, and there would be no negative repercussions. Well, with a build-up like that, she said, sure. And certainly at first, the OxyContin really helped relieve her pain. But within not very long, she had to take more to get the same result. Within 7 months, I was taking 280 milligrams a day. That's the equivalent of taking 56 Percocets every day, and I was completely addicted. Suddenly, I got a new doctor, and my new doctor wouldn't refill my prescription. I discovered what happens when you're addicted to something and you can't get it. I actually had to check myself into a drug rehabilitation program. It was so awful. There is indeed a growing epidemic of addiction and overdose related to opioid prescription pain medications, which include oxycodone and hydrocodone. Between 1993 and 2012, the rate of hospitalization from prescription pain pill overdoses increased fivefold among people 45 to 85. The rate of overdose deaths for adults over age 55 soared 700%. And these statistics probably underestimate the true toll the epidemic of pain pills is taking on older Americans. When an older person taking multiple meds doesn't wake up, death is attributed to natural causes, even if the true cause is an opiate overdose. The body's ability to clear all drugs from our system declines as we age. And this is especially true of pain-killing drugs. The danger is compounded when you take several different drugs. Opioid pain medications are deadly for older patients who have trouble keeping track of what they've taken. If someone takes an 80-milligram dose of oxycodone and then forgets that they take it and take another one, that could have a fatal consequence. You know, it used to be that, well, what do we mean used to be? This article says it used to be that opioids were rarely prescribed for cases of chronic pain. But how far back are we thinking? As I have heard the story, about a century ago, opiates were used widely throughout America. They were in everything from Lydia Pinkham's for that time of the month to colic syrups to ease babies' pain. It seems that everyone in America 125 years ago was taking opiates in some form or was taking laudanum. Morphine was hailed as being a great non-addictive painkiller. Heroin was widely available. In fact, I was told that the Food and Drug Administration was set up to counter the widespread use of opiates to relieve pain because they are so highly addictive. When I studied with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, opioid pain medication like morphine was withheld. Even when people were dying of terminal cancer, they were not allowed to have morphine. And Elizabeth championed the right of people at their end of life to have access to opiate painkillers. Yes, they're addictive, she said, but we're addicting someone who's going to die anyhow. So when this article says that they traditionally were rarely prescribed, I think, well, how far back are we thinking here? It has gone back and forth. Elizabeth did, by the 60s and 70s, get that changed in hospitals so that morphine pumps were available to terminal patients. And then, in the 1990s, the American Pain Society, the American Academy of Pain Medicine, and several other professional groups launched a campaign encouraging doctors to be more aggressive in relieving chronic pain. They claim, probably correctly, that chronic pain affects an estimated 100 million Americans, and they didn't think that doctors were really giving these people the pain relief they needed. Unfortunately, the push for wider use of painkillers was largely financed by, you guessed it, the drug makers. They vastly understated the risk of addiction and greatly overstated the effectiveness of the opiate drugs they were pushing. Between 1996 and 2002, Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, funded more than 20,000 educational programs for doctors promoting long-term use of opiate painkillers for chronic pain. And so, over the next 15 years, the rate of opiate pain reliever use more than doubled in the United States. The consumption of oxycodone increased fivefold. By 2012, 8% of adults 40 and over reported taking an opiate painkiller in the past 30 days. How could we have been so misled? We know that people who take an opiate drug for 3 to 6 months are going to be taking it for the rest of their lives unless they get off it. These drugs are addictive. All of the studies find that long-term opiate use is compellingly harmful. Overdose, abuse, heart attack, falls, fractures, constipation, sexual dysfunction, the list goes on and on. Based on everything that we know, daily use of strong opioid pain medication is a lousy option. I am quoting. I'm not making this up. This is what the researcher said. It's a lousy option. These drugs become less effective at controlling pain over time and ultimately make you even more sensitive to pain. We've been throwing medication at chronic pain, thinking we're going to make it go away, but it just doesn't do that. Opiate drugs might be able to reduce chronic pain by, at the most, 30%. Other approaches can help more. No one told me the drug I was being offered was compared to heroin, said the woman that we started this article with. If I'd been told the truth, I never would have started taking it. Find out what it is you are being offered. Long-acting opiate drugs, extra caution needed. Painkillers linked to low blood sugar. There's a little more that we need to learn about the problems with painkillers before we go on to learn about herbs that can help us to deal with pain. So we'll come back next week and keep going on what's going on with pain-killing drugs. It's not a pretty picture. But as I said, we have woken up from our collective belief that we can pass out opiate painkillers and people won't get addicted to them. And we are coming off of our high of taking these. And even medical journals are now suggesting that we find other ways to deal with our pain. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Gemini, as always. It has been a great pleasure. And I hope that excuse me. I hope that you all come and visit my YouTube channel. Lots of fun YouTubes, seeing me identifying plants. If you can't quite wait to get your hands in the soil, watching me out there playing with the plants is a really good way to do it. You know, I asked my granddaughter today, I said, I read this funny thing, and I don't know, were they pulling my leg? They told me that there's YouTubes of people opening things they bought, and she said, "Oh, there really are, Grandma."
Opening things they bought?
Yes. And my daughter said, no, these people are sent products and then they open them on YouTube and comment about them. I'm like,
oh,
it's amazing. So get your hands in your own soil or come to YouTube. It's not the same. but enjoy it anyhow. I'll see you next week, Gemini.
Thank you so much, Susan. And this concludes part 43 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susun Weed at Time Monk Radio.